He told everyone I was overreacting, that I was dramatic. But if you saw what I found in his phone, you'd understand why I burned it all down. Sunday dinner was supposed to be uneventful, just another awkward gathering where I swallowed my pride and tried to keep the peace. Instead, it became the moment everything snapped, literally. I was sitting there, trying to make small talk, when my niece, Haley, leaned back in her chair, rolled her eyes, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mom says you're too poor for real jewelry." Before I even processed the words, she reached across the table, grabbed the necklace I was wearing, the one my grandma had given me when I was 13, and yanked. The chain snapped in an instant. I watched, frozen, as the little green stone tumbled down into my mashed potatoes with a dull thud. And then, laughter. My sister, Rachel, actually laughed. Not nervous laughter. Not shocked. But a genuine laugh, like this was some joke she'd been waiting to deliver. Haley smirked, satisfied, and sat back like she'd just flicked a crumb off her sleeve. Even Thomas, my brother-in-law, stayed quiet, staring down at his plate as if speaking might set off another storm. That necklace wasn't about money. It was one of the few things I had from Grandma Carol, and she had chosen me to pass it down to, not Rachel. It was my connection to her, something I wore proudly at family dinners as if Grandma were still sitting there beside me. And in one careless, cruel move, Haley destroyed it, with her mother's full approval. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't give them the scene they probably wanted. Instead, I stood up slowly, wiped the stone clean, and folded the broken chain into my palm. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound cutting through their laughter. Without a word, I walked out of that house. And in that moment, I wasn't just leaving Sunday dinner. I was leaving behind years of being their safety net. 2 years of quietly paying Haley's rent, 2 years of funding her independence, ended that evening. You see, Rachel has always had a problem with me. I just never imagined she'd raise her daughter to treat me like dirt. But I should have seen it coming, the little digs at family gatherings, my name missing from thank you cards, the way my offers to help were met with that fake, tight smile. Looking back, the signs were all there. Rachel is my only sister. We were never especially close, but I always believed family meant something. That's how I was raised, help even when they don't help you back. I let her passive-aggressive comments slide. I let her twist every kind gesture into something self-serving. And I kept giving. Haley? She's 21 now. The golden child in Rachel's eyes. Untouchable. No rule ever applied to her. If she messed up, it was someone else's fault. Failed a class? Clearly the teacher hated her. Got in trouble? She was misunderstood. For years, I told myself she'd grow out of it. But you can't grow out of entitlement when your mother rewards you for it. 2 years ago, Rachel had called me sobbing. Haley had outgrown their house, said living under her parents' roof was crushing her mental health. Rachel said they couldn't afford to get her a place. Thomas barely worked after his accident, and money was tight. I didn't even hesitate. I covered the rent every single month. Quietly. No strings attached. I thought maybe giving Haley stability would help her find herself. She never once said thank you. That Sunday, the second I walked through the door, I felt it. The tension. Rachel didn't greet me. Haley smirked like she had a secret. Thomas sat in the corner, silent, like he was just trying to make it through the evening without another explosion. I wore Grandma's necklace that day, like always, because it made me feel grounded in a family that never really treated me like one of their own. And when Haley broke it, when Rachel laughed, I realized something sharp and cold. They didn't just disrespect me. They enjoyed it. So I left. No tears. No words. Just the quiet decision that they would never forget what came next. Because that night, walking out of Rachel's house, I finally understood. I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. And I promise you, what I did after made sure they'd never treat me like dirt again. The morning after that disaster of a dinner, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. No guilt. No hesitation. Just certainty. I picked up the phone, dialed Haley's landlord, and told him flat out, September's rent would be the last he'd ever see from me. She had 30 days, no exceptions. And I didn't breathe a word to Rachel or Haley. Not a hint, not a warning. Why should I? They never cared how their actions landed on me. So I decided they could find out the same way they always made me feel, like an afterthought. But believe me, that was only the beginning. I went silent. After that dinner, I cut all contact. No texts. No calls. No reminders. The payments just stopped. September slipped away, and with it, the rent. And then came October 1st, the day I knew everything would finally start unraveling. It was late morning. I was at work, nursing a mug of cold coffee, half reading through a flood of emails when my phone buzzed. Rachel. I ignored it. Then Haley. Then Rachel again. 5 calls in 10 minutes. I turned my phone face down on the desk and let it hum until the buzzing stopped. The first text came a few minutes later, sugary sweet. Hi, not sure if you forgot or if there was a mix-up, but Haley's landlord says rent didn't come in this month. Can you check? 5 minutes after that, the tone shifted. Haley's freaking out. She got a warning notice. This is really serious. And then came the third, Emily, this isn't funny. What are you doing? I didn't reply. Not yet. I wanted the silence to stretch, to let that confusion and panic build. Let them feel what it's like to be ignored. The next day, the calls started again. Rachel twice. And then, Thomas. That's the one I answered. I don't know why, maybe because I knew it would unnerve her that I picked up when she wasn't the one in control. Rachel's voice came sharp through the line. So you're seriously punishing her over a stupid joke? That's low, even for you. I stayed quiet, just listening as she rambled. She said Haley was humiliated, that the landlord was threatening eviction, that I was making her look like a bad mother in front of her own daughter. And then she said the words that made my stomach turn cold: "You're blowing this out of proportion because you're jealous." Jealous. I could have lost it right there, but I didn't. Instead, I reminded her, slowly, deliberately, that for 2 years, I had covered her daughter's rent. That I paid the deposit, the internet, even chipped in for furniture. That I gave Haley the independence Rachel loved to brag about, even though Haley never once earned it. And then I reminded her of that Sunday dinner. How Haley snapped our grandmother's necklace right off my neck, sneered at me, and how every single one of them laughed. Not one person stood up for me. Not even Rachel. Silence. That heavy, guilty silence that hangs right before someone starts twisting the story to protect themselves. And sure enough, Rachel tried. She said it wasn't that serious, that Haley was just being dramatic, that she didn't mean it. That's when I finally told her, I'm done. It's not my problem anymore. She tried to scramble, said Haley would apologize, that they could make it right. But I knew better. They weren't sorry. They were scared because they'd lost their free ride. By the end of that week, Haley was officially out. The landlord, Alan, called me directly. He sounded almost apologetic. Said he didn't want to kick out a young girl, but rent was rent, and she hadn't paid. She wasn't answering his calls either. He asked if I was stepping in. No, I told him, plain and final. A few days later, the proof was plastered all over social media. The glamorous city selfies, the brunch spreads, the carefully curated Independence Act, it all disappeared. In its place, a filtered photo of her cat back in her childhood bedroom. Pretending nothing had changed. But I knew it had. And so did she. That's when Rachel texted me one final time. Hope you're happy. She has nowhere to go now and no money. You did this. But no. They did this. And the truth? I hadn't even started yet. 2 weeks after Haley was shoved back into that pink, poster-covered bedroom of hers, the house felt smaller, too loud in the worst ways. I didn't hear it from Rachel directly, she still hadn't had the nerve to call me. No, the whispers came from Jenna, our cousin who seems to have a sixth sense for other people's drama. Jenna works part-time with Rachel at the community center and, bless her, has never met a secret she couldn't pass along with relish. According to Jenna, Haley's return turned the place into a reality show episode. Doors were slamming at all hours. Screaming matches shredded the quiet of the night. Haley called Rachel controlling, Rachel called Haley ungrateful. One fight, Jenna told me, ended with Rachel snapping, "If you wanted to live with someone who dotes on you, you could have moved in with Aunt Emily." Haley fired back, "At least Emily has a job." Ouch. Accurate, but still. Thomas stayed his usual quiet self, sitting like a small, deflated man on the couch, eyes glued to whatever football game was on. Honestly, sometimes I wondered if he'd forgotten how to have a real conversation unless the refs were blowing whistles. Haley tried one last desperate move. She marched down to Alan's office, the landlord I'd spoken with when I arranged the payments, and spun him a tale. Said I must have made a mistake, that of course I'd cover October, that I'd been distracted, stressed, or overwhelmed. She framed me as the absent aunt who forgot to keep things steady. How generous of her imagination. Alan didn't fall for it. He pulled up the ledger, showed her the cancellation notice, and pointed to the termination clause like it was a punchline. The lease wasn't merely late, it was over. The locks were scheduled to be changed. Jenna's voice on the phone when she told me this sounded almost giddy. She came home with 3 trash bags and a cracked iPhone screen, she said. No apartment. No money. No clue. I couldn't help a little inward smile, quiet, controlled. Reality has a way of landing harder than any passive-aggressive comment. That's when I made my second move. What they didn't know, what Rachel never once stopped to think about, was that my help didn't end at rent. For 2 years I'd been silently covering the last of their car payments, too. Not a luxury SUV, nothing flashy. Just a dependable second vehicle that got Thomas to doctor's appointments and got Rachel to her part-time shifts. When his disability checks fell short and months piled up, I'd stepped in. I set up autopay, arranged transfers, paid late fees, no drama, no announcements. I did it because I could, because they asked for help and I, the eternal giver, obliged. And then, late October, I cut the autopay. No drama. No warning. Just like the rent, it vanished. I watched, with a strange calm, as another lifeline snapped. A few weeks later Jenna called again, breathless. Rachel had opened a letter and turned the house upside down. Missed payment. Final notice of default. The words themselves felt clinical, like a judge's gavel. The car was teetering on the brink of repossession and Rachel, predictably, went nuclear. She berated Thomas for not catching it, accused him of being careless, accused him of not keeping me happy, because that somehow made sense to her. It didn't. It was projection, plain and ugly. Then the text came, "Emily, we really need to talk. This isn't about Haley anymore. You can't take the car away from us. That's cruel." I read it twice and then I put the phone down. No response. No justification needed. The universe was doing what I'd refused to do for a long time, teaching lessons with consequences. And consequences arrived early one morning in November. A repo truck rolled up, 2 men in reflective vests walked up the driveway, and neighbors watched as someone loaded the car onto a flatbed. Rachel bolted into the yard in a bathrobe, hair wild, screaming at the men who, legally, only had paperwork. Haley filmed the whole thing, breathless and indignant, as if she'd been wronged by some cosmic thief. She uploaded a half-rant, complete with sob music, about how people smile in your face and ruin your life behind your back. Except, funny thing, the internet has a longer memory than family. A few people in the comment thread remembered a different side, the quiet aunt who always covered bills, the one who'd shown up month after month. Distant cousins chimed in with receipts, metaphorical ones, pinpointing when I'd stepped in. The tone shifted. Sympathy, then reality checks. It was small, but it was there. Karma, it seemed, had a comment section. Rachel's pride was bruised, but that was only the warm-up. Bills started piling up. The furnace made odd groaning noises. Insurance notices clenched like paper fists. Savings dwindled faster than her bluster. People who'd glided past me at family barbecues suddenly grew curious. Aunts called. An old neighbor called. Even Thomas's brother, who'd never liked Rachel, tapped me on the shoulder and asked what had happened. For the first time, I told the truth. Not with tears or rage, just honest facts. The rent. The necklace. The laughter at the table. Every quiet payment I'd made that they treated like air. Most of them didn't meet me with claws, they met me with shock and then, mostly, with something I hadn't expected, gratitude. You did more than enough, Emily, people told me. It felt strange hearing that after being invisible for so long. But I wasn't finished. There was one last thread Rachel thought she still controlled, one thing she kept like a final ace in the sleeve. She believed it was safe, unassailable. She believed she could call it hers forever. She was wrong. And I was already setting the pieces in motion. By November the cracks were obvious to anyone paying attention. The car was gone. The shouting matches between Rachel and Haley had become so constant that even Jenna, the cousin who used to gossip like it was a hobby, finally stopped calling me with play-by-play updates because even she was exhausted. I heard Haley had started sleeping through mornings, surfacing around noon only to microwave sad leftovers and grumble about the Wi-Fi being slow. It sounded pathetic, and a little petty, and I felt none of the pity they'd once expected from me. Rachel swung between fury and denial like a pendulum. One minute she'd be raging in a voice loud enough to make the walls tremble, the next she'd be convincing anyone who'd listen that everything was fine, that she had it under control. Every time I thought the storm might pass, someone else would tap my shoulder, an aunt, a neighbor, a cousin, and whisper about some new fallout. The ripple effects were everywhere. And still, unbelievably, Rachel acted like she hadn't lost any footing. Even without a word from me, she started sending out feelers through mutual friends, little rumors and emergency updates designed to make it look like she was the one under siege. She told Jenna that Thomas was struggling without the car, that Haley might fail out of her online classes again, that the house was about to fall apart. She tried the old play, make people feel sorry for you so they don't look closer. Then one message slipped through the noise and stopped me cold. She'd told someone, loudly enough for the grapevine to carry it, that if she had to, she'd go to Grandma's lawyer and contest the will. That line hit like a brick. So here's what most of the family didn't realize, and what Rachel apparently either forgot or never knew in the first place. When Grandma Carol died, she didn't leave a fortune. There were a few little heirlooms, some savings that vanished into medical bills, and a modest house that had already been sold. But she also left a small trust account. Not the kind you read about in movies, no castles, no private jets, but a tidy amount. Low six figures. Meaningful, but not ridiculous. The important part? Grandma gave me the keys, figuratively. She put me in charge of deciding how that money would be distributed, and she made it clear it wasn't to be handed out automatically or equally. It was to be used as needed, at my discretion. She trusted my judgment. Not Rachel's. Not anyone else's. Only two people besides me had known the full picture, the lawyer and Thomas. When Thomas got hurt years ago and was drowning in out-of-pocket medical bills, I quietly used part of that trust to help cover his costs. He never asked for the spotlight. He didn't tell Rachel. He just accepted the help and got on with surviving. So that trust was never an abstract threat, it was something practical that had already done work in this family. And that's why Rachel's threat to contest the will sounded so reckless. She had no idea who actually held the pen. I called Grandma's lawyer and told him about Rachel's little threat. He laughed, kindly, as if I'd offered him a bit of entertainment, and reminded me who signed the paperwork. Then I asked him to do something I should have done sooner, put a formal freeze on any disbursements, an administrative lock until the whole situation settled. He confirmed it, said it was done. After that, I sent one short message to Rachel, the first time I'd spoken to her in weeks. Don't touch the trust. You'll get nothing from it. Not now, not ever. Her answer was instant and predictably vile. You self-righteous be asterisk asterisk asterisk. You think you're better than everyone just because Grandma liked you more. You were always the favorite and you never let anyone forget it. You just want to watch us suffer asterisk. I read it. I stared. Then I blocked her. A day later, the surprise no one expected walked up my front steps. It was Thomas. He looked smaller in person, frielier than the man I remembered, but there was a steadiness in his eyes. He limped into my kitchen holding a grocery bag wrapped in a dish towel, like something precious. He asked if he could come in. I said yes. He sat down at my table, slid the wrapped bundle forward, and when I unwrapped it there it was, Grandma's sewing box. The wood was marked with tiny dents and the initials she'd burned into the lid. I had thought it lost forever. He told me he'd kept it safe all these years, even though Rachel had told him he should just donate it. He'd been quietly saving it for someone who would care. Then he looked me in the eye and said something I didn't expect to hear. Thank you for what you did for me, he said. I never agreed with how they treated you. I just didn't know what to do about it. Why now? I asked. He didn't make excuses. He said, because you were right to stop. I just wish you hadn't had to. We sat there in the warm kitchen light for a long minute, listening to the refrigerator hum and the thin creak of the floor. I didn't ask for more. He didn't offer. He nodded, turned, and left with the quiet dignity of someone who'd finally said what he meant to say. It was small, just a thank you in a box, but it landed harder than I thought it would. Gratitude does that sometimes. It surprises you with how much it matters when it finally shows up. Rachel, though? She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Losing a car, watching your daughter flounder, being publicly embarrassed, those things bruise, but they don't always break someone like her. She began to fume, and I could feel it in the way the family grapevine picked up volume. She was scheming, whispering, plotting ways to claw back whatever control she felt she'd lost. Only she had no idea where the next real storm would come from. Because the next blow wasn't going to come from me, no. It was going to come from the very people Rachel had always relied on to believe her version of events. The people she'd lied to, leaned on, and manipulated were starting to wake up. And once they did, I knew it wouldn't stop with petty threats or angry texts. What I didn't know was how fast it would spread, or which one of them would be first to turn. But I could feel the momentum building, like a train gathering speed on a track I'd quietly pointed it toward. And I was ready to watch it hit. After Thomas left my house with nothing but that quiet nod and Grandma's sewing box left behind, I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the last of it. That was his way of saying thank you, of closing the door on all the ugliness. For one brief moment, I let myself believe the storm had passed. I was wrong. A week later, right on schedule, the next wave hit. I was at work when Jenna's message popped up on my phone. Just one line, no explanation. Rachel's trying to flip the narrative. Be ready. I didn't know what she meant until that weekend. Aunt Linda's birthday lunch. Nothing extravagant, just a casual family gathering. But the second I stepped inside, I felt it, the air shifted. Conversations dipped when I passed. People stared a little too long, like they'd been fed a story and were waiting to see if I matched it. That familiar high school tactic Rachel had perfected, work the room before the target arrives. And there she was. Already seated, of course, with Haley slouched beside her, glued to her phone. Rachel's smile stretched wide when our eyes met, the kind of smile that shows teeth but no warmth. Emily, she announced loudly, as if I were the guest of honor. Glad you made it. We were just talking about generosity. I didn't bite. I just walked past her and into the kitchen, but throughout the day, the whispers found me. Family doesn't turn its back. Some people let money change them. It's a shame what bitterness can do. Little rehearsed lines drifting across the room like smoke. I stayed quiet, watching her work the crowd, spinning her tale with practiced ease. According to her, I had abandoned Haley, pulled the rent out from under her without warning, sabotaged their transportation while Thomas was still struggling, and all but left them in ruins. Rachel was the tragic mother. Haley, the misunderstood daughter. And me? The ice-cold aunt who decided to punish her own family. At some point, Aunt Linda pulled me aside, her voice soft but serious. Is any of this true, Emily? I didn't dodge. I told her everything. About 2 years of rent. About Grandma's necklace, snapped in half while they laughed. About the car payments, the trust, all of it. Linda's eyes widened at one detail in particular. She really broke Carol's necklace? I nodded. Linda just shook her head, like she'd suspected it deep down but didn't want to believe it. I thought that would be the climax of the evening. But Rachel hadn't planned for the twist that came next. As people gathered their coats, Haley's phone rang, loud, on speaker. She didn't even glance at the screen before answering. Hi, this is Michael from Bank Name, calling to discuss your recent application. The words cut through the chatter like a blade. Haley's face went pale as she fumbled to shut it off, but it was too late. Everyone heard. Turns out, Haley had tried to open a line of credit, in my name. She used my social, my email, even faked my signature. The only reason it didn't go through? I had a credit freeze from an old identity theft scare years back. The room went still. For the first time in my life, I saw Rachel without a mask. Not smug, not seething, just stunned. Like someone had ripped the script right out of her hands. Haley jumped up, blurting excuses. Said it was a mistake, that she didn't know the bank would call right then. Then she bolted, face red, muttering half-formed denials. Rachel followed seconds later, barely keeping herself together. And me? I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. That was the moment everything flipped. The same relatives who had been side-eyeing me all afternoon suddenly came over, voices low but urgent. They wanted details. They wanted the truth. And for once, I gave it to them. Calm. Honest. No drama. Rachel had already written the play, and all I did was let everyone watch the curtain fall. By that night, 3 apology texts came in, 2 from cousins, 1 from Aunt Linda. Simple, remorseful, almost embarrassed. The truth was out now. Rachel couldn't spin it anymore. And Haley, well, she had crossed into a whole new level of consequence. But even then, I knew. This wasn't the end. The real ending, the final fight, that was still waiting in the wings. And when it came, it wouldn't just be about me anymore. It was going to tear straight through the lies Rachel had spent years weaving. After the bank call fiasco, everything went quiet. Too quiet. For 2 days, Rachel didn't text, didn't send one of her cryptic guilt trips through Jenna, didn't so much as breathe in my direction. And that silence? That's when I knew she was cooking something up. Rachel doesn't stay quiet unless she's sharpening the knives. On the 3rd day, the storm broke. I was folding laundry, half distracted by the hum of the dryer, when a violent pounding rattled my front door. Not a polite knock. Not even an impatient knock. This was furious, the kind of pounding you hear in cop shows right before someone gets dragged out in handcuffs. I didn't need to guess who it was. I opened the door, and there she was, Rachel. Hair yanked into a messy bun, eyes blazing like she hadn't slept in days. Behind her stood Thomas, arms folded, looking like he'd been dragged there against his will. And in the car? Haley, hunched in the passenger seat, glued to her phone like she was waiting for sentencing. Rachel didn't even let me say hello. She launched straight in. How dare you humiliate us in front of our entire family? You couldn't just let it go, could you? You had to turn everyone against us. I stayed silent, leaning against the doorframe, letting her performance unravel. You were always jealous, she spat. Jealous of me, jealous of Haley. Grandma only gave you control of the trust because she pitied you. Because you had nothing, and she felt sorry for you. And that's when Thomas stepped forward. He didn't shout. He didn't scold. He just said my name softly and handed me something. A folded letter, yellowing at the edges. I opened it with shaky fingers, and the second I saw the handwriting, my chest tightened. Grandma Carol's writing. Dated 6 months before she passed. It wasn't long. Just a few lines, but it hit like thunder. Emily, if Rachel ever makes you feel guilty for saying no, read this again. You've done enough. You've always done more. Let the ones who take without thanks finally learn how to stand. I looked up at Thomas. He gave me a single, firm nod. Then he turned and walked back toward the car. Rachel didn't even notice. She was still spitting venom, her voice rising higher and higher, as if sheer volume could drown out the truth. You think you're better than us now? You think you're some kind of martyr? You cut us off over a necklace? That thing wasn't even real. That's when I moved. I stepped past her, letter still clutched in my hand, and walked straight down to the car. Haley looked up at me when I opened the passenger door. Her eyes were swollen, mascara smudged, cheeks blotchy. She didn't say a word. I did. Just one. You tried to steal from me. That isn't immaturity. That's a crime. Her gaze flicked away, shame written all over her face. No excuses this time. Rachel stormed after me, voice breaking. She's just a kid. She's 21, that's still a kid to me. I turned to her and said quietly, then maybe it's time you stop treating her like one. What came next was a blur of half-formed insults and desperate pleading, words I won't bother repeating. Finally, she yanked Haley out of the car, shoved her into the driver's seat, and peeled off down the road with a screech that echoed long after the taillights disappeared. I stood there on my porch, Grandma's letter trembling in my hand. And that was it. That was the real end. No more calls. No apologies. No sudden redemption arc. Rachel never paid me back. Haley never thanked me. They didn't wake up one morning as better people. But they lost access to me. And for people like them, that's the deepest cut of all. It didn't stop there, though. They lost the house next, couldn't keep up with the mortgage. Packed up and moved into a rental an hour away. Word through the grapevine is Haley dropped out of school again, slinging coffee part-time at a cafe. Not glamorous, but maybe the first honest step she's ever taken without a safety net. Rachel still talks, of course. Still spins her stories, still paints herself the victim. But now? People see through it. More and more each day. And here's what I learned, sometimes you don't need revenge. You don't need to burn everything down. Sometimes you just need to let the truth breathe. And when it does, it cuts sharper than anything else.